In 1954, in the town of Rio Tercero, Córdoba province, Argentina, the Rio Tercero military factory was officially established, and started its ammunition production. On the morning of November 3, shortly before 9 a.m., a series of explosions occurred inside the factory. The impact left 2 craters, and the blast left 7 people killed, and more than 300 injured. Of all the 400 employees that were present during the explosion, none were amongst the deaths, which all occurred outside the factory. Because the factory was built only 200 meters away from the nearest town, it was left completely devastated. And since ammunition was the product, it was part of the debris from the explosion. This resulted in shells having been deposited all over the place. It was turned into a total war zone. Thousands of residents lost their home and fled to neighboring towns. When President Carlos Menem held a press conference on the same day, he was asked if it could have been a terrorist attack. In his response, he repeated that it was indeed an accident, and firmly dismissed that it could have been any attack. Initially, the blast was ruled as an accident. However, not everyone was convinced, and it was believed that the explosion was linked to the illegal sale of arms to Croatia and Ecuador. During one of several cases that were filed, the judge kept to the theory of an accident, attributing the cause of the fire in the TNT tanks to either a cigarette, a spark produced by a forklift, or the sunlight being focused strongly enough to one point, by some magnifying factor. When these theories were put to the test, it turned out that the samples that were used were mixed with aluminum, which increases the combustion capacity. 2 other experiments that followed, however, both concluded that the ignition was caused by the spark of a forklift. These results ruled out the theory of the link with the illegal sale. In 2003, however, experts at the National University of Córdoba concluded that the explosions were programmed and coordinated by experts in explosives. They found that in the factory, it all started with a fire on a throttle drum, and that no evidence was found that the fire could have originated accidentally. The effect that the forklift could have had, either by colliding with the drum or sparks, was completely ruled out. The initiation of the flame in the drum was produced by a programmed effect, using existing electronic devices on the market, such as a cell phone. It was not ruled out that a time mechanism could have been used. In 2006, a judge issued a further look into the origins of the explosion, with the main focus of the arms sales theory in mind. It was determined that there were 3 explosions inside the factory. The first 2 happened simultaneously, one in the cargo plant, and one in a warehouse. They intentionally used a stronger bomb in the warehouse, in order to redirect the shock wave away from the workers inside the factory. These explosions ignited the 100,000 tons of projectiles stored in the ammunition warehouse, and this third explosion was the one that caused the extensive damage to the city. The tribunal determined that multiple unidentified individuals, with knowledge about explosives, entered the factory at night on November 2, or early in the following morning. They made their way to the cargo plant and the warehouse, quote, with the intent to place the detonators and reinforcers needed to cause the explosions hours later, unquote. It was also found that a large amount of TNT, and crates of 105 mm cannon projectiles were stockpiled on the cargo plant, something both unusual and dangerous. Many workers, senior staff, and the union complained about this situation, demanding the transfer of the explosives and ammunition to a safe place. Another suspicious event was that the week before the incident, the director and subdirector of the factory both traveled to Buenos Aires. At approximately 8:50 a.m., a tank of TNT caught fire in the cargo plant, followed by others. The cargo plant shed stored approximately 200 tanks of explosives, stored in 2 separated groups, the biggest one of TNT and the smaller one of hexalite. There also were projectiles without a fuse. Minutes before the fire started, Emilio Ostera, the supervisor, saw a person dressed as a soldier near the tank. Even though he did not have any reason to be there. Ostera and other workers tried to extinguish the fire, but then the cargo plant shed exploded, and the shock wave flung Ostera approximately 80 meters away, seriously injuring him. Eventually, in 2014, the Federal Oral Tribunal of Córdoba condemned 4 high functionaries of the state-owned corporation Fabricaciones Militares. They were sentenced to 10 and 13 years in prison for the crime of intentional havoc, aggravated by the death of people in a degree of co-authorship. The tribunal concluded with unanimity and certainty that the plant was destroyed to hide the smuggling of weapons to Croatia and Ecuador. Years later, in February 2021, the former president at the time of the incident, Carlos Menem, was put on trial for his involvement. But weeks before the trial would start, Menem died in Buenos Aires, with the town refusing to join the national mourning. At the site of the accident, a monument is placed, remembering the 7 victims of the explosion. And an annual memorial ceremony is held on the 3rd of November, the day of the tragedy, which starts at 9 a.m., the time of the first explosion.